Alright, like, click, subscribe, do all that. You already know what time it is. It's Netflix time. This movie's called The Drug King. A petty smuggler from Busan drives headfirst into illicit drug trafficking in the 1970s and rises to become king of narcotics exports to Japan. So this movie came out 2018. It's about 2 hours and 20 minutes long. Spoiler alert, let's get it. It starts off giving us some backstory about this thing called crank, which is supposed to be some type of methamphetamine. According to what they're saying, Japanese and Koreans are the first ever to try this type of drug. And I'm gonna go ahead and say that's highly debatable for real. And here we have Lee Busan. He's a mercenary, you know, sells jewelry and stuff like that. This guy helps him get into the smuggling business. So while they're on this boat, he's inspecting the jewels to make sure that they're real. And everything's all good and gravy. Until cops show up on the scene. What the fuck? He's like, take the bag, get up out of here. Lee dives over the door with a tent and the money. But come to find out they were just fucking with him. It was just all a test. He tells him more about his background. He's looking to raise some real money. So for right now, he's importing mediocre drugs through like fish and rice containers. You know, all that good shit. They got their little import boat set up. He's like, yeah, what's good, niggas? They looking like, yeah, just give me the money so we can get the fuck up out of here. And that's what he does. They all good. As he's dancing, celebrating with his wife and kids, he gets a message about his cousin getting his ass whooped. Apparently he owes money to these niggas, but Lee ended up kicking his ass. He's like, dude, just pay their money. Then this guy comes out, leader of the crew. Lee's like, whatever you need me to do, I'll do it. You know what I'm saying? I'll pay it back. So this guy puts hard liquor in a cooler and then pisses in it and tells him to drink it. He doesn't decide to do it, so he ends up cutting off this cousin's ear and shit. I'm like, wow. He's like, if you still refuse, I'll cut him all the way up. So he drinks it. Ugh, it's fucking disgusting. Next day, he's talking to this guy. He's like, man, I gotta make some money. He tells him about a drug called crank, and he's ready to go full-fledged on this shit. The problem is you're gonna need connections because everybody gets caught selling this stuff. So he goes to some local G'd up niggas. He gives them hell of a sales pitch, and he's okay with it. But of course, he's got to run it by his boss first, and everything's all good. Then they go by the bar and talk business. Then he gives them this marvelous plan about how there's no way we could be stopped doing this. Not even by government officials or police. On the other end, his boss done slipped up, so he gives up Lee as a scapegoat. He told Lee to meet on the boat where he'd be by himself. And these motherfuckers here just waiting on him. So they tied him up, beat the fire out of him, and who's leading the troops? Prosecutor Bach. They beat the hell out of him, but because he's just a scapegoat, they don't kill him. But that's going to turn around and be the biggest mistake Bach makes. So he gets locked up, his wife comes to visit him, and he has this plan to get out of jail and have prosecutors on his side. So they call on this guy to make sure the plan goes into action. Now the wife was supposed to persuade this guy into doing something. It ended up failing. Or so we thought, because all she really was supposed to do is get the information and books on contacts, which she ended up doing. She ends up talking to the police chief, which, you know, has a bond, and then he is able to get out. After he gets out, he calls his wife and lets her know that him and his cousin are going to go to Japan. But first, they got to stop by Chia's house. Chia has a lot of contacts with government officials, and they need him to record the books, which did some convincing, but he finally got on board. Then they get together and talk about getting one of the best chemists they have out there, who's Professor Su. He gathers up the crew, and they're all ready to go. Professor Su is known for making the best crank in the history of all Japan. They get to the boat to get it cracking. The guy they talked to before is basically now their hitman to make sure if anything goes wrong, you know what I'm saying, he go make it do what it do. They get to talking and eventually they find out Chia's been scamming money out the top. He's like, dude, why are you getting extra? You're already getting most of the profit. And he basically lets them know you need me, ain't shit you can do about it. You know, he's thinking to himself like, alright, I got something for that ass. Then we got this legendary Yakuza man. Lee's gonna talk to him so he can get access to the legendary Chairman Jang. The legendary Chairman is like the boss of all bosses when it comes to drug care. And because of the way he likes the way he moves, he sets up a meeting. Lee and his cousin make it there ready for the meeting. When he walks by, he hears this gangster on the phone who had orders to kill the chairman and kill Lee. So he gets his cousin in the bathroom. He tells him to go get the briefcase up there. Get it up there first. Hurry up. He calls the chairman and lets him know he's on his way. But after he gets off the phone, this motherfucker heard the conversation like, oh shit. So while his cousin and the gangster are both getting on the elevator, Lee's fighting with this nigga and throws him down the damn steps. He gets upstairs warning his cousin. They start shooting niggas. Then it becomes ruckus and mayhem. Lee dives at him to save the chairman's life. He ends up getting stabbed in the process. Other niggas come to murk that nigga. And then everything's all good. Well, for the most part anyway. They were able to do 2 business ventures instead of 1 because of the fact that he saved his life. And then it's party time. They got hella dough on the boat. And now he's almost a made man. What he doesn't know yet is that Prosecutor Kim is on the case. He's gonna become a problem. Back at home, Lee brings the idea of getting divorced from his wife. Why? So he can transfer the money and it won't be traced. It's an insane plan, but he's a master manipulator and she goes along with it. When they ask, she tells everybody her husband's part of the food distribution network and art industry. He goes back to Shaolin, gives him his drugs and money, actually double the amount. And he got her satisfied. He's like, look man, just don't get above your britches out here. It's hot in these streets. So like I said, Prosecutor Kim is still in the case. He's going to use this guy in a red shirt as a decoy. But what they don't know is this policeman right there in the beige shirt, he's actually in on it. Yeah, he's a crooked cop that actually works with Mr. Lee. And they set him up lovely. Because the guy he gets as a decoy actually works with Mr. Lee also. And they basically planned a fake capture. So all this was just to keep Kim busy. But you're thinking to yourself, why is this guy giving up all the information? So it turns out around the time that he told him, Mr. Lee already had a government official on lock. So all the information wouldn't have mattered anyway. They can't do shit to him. Sneaky motherfuckers. Prosecutor Kim has to know he's been had. Meanwhile, Chia's getting all paranoid because the police are coming and he's like, yo, we gotta get up out of here, man. I can't work with you no more. Lee didn't let him know it was all part of his plan, but honestly, he wanted to get rid of him anyway because he was skimming out the top. He already had to connect to this point, so he's like, man, fuck Chia. So he brings out a nice little stash and employs this guy, but not without getting him high first. Because this nigga had to try to crank. So why did he need him? For a bigger lab. He brings Professor Sue over to the lab. He teaches Mr. Lee how to make the batch. And he did it to perfection. He gave the professor a bunch of money and he was like, alright, yo, I'm going. Now he gets to start his new empire. They go to the strip club. Then he starts telling them about a bunch of important people. This lady by the name of Chi-Chi is actually the chairman's granddaughter. And basically, if you get a chance to get close to her, you're automatically in the diplomatic circle. Which means basically you're a made man, so you already know what he's thinking. He approaches her, charms her. Before you know it, he's taking her out on a date. They're enjoying themselves. She gives the okay for the meeting. Now he's finally about to meet Mayor Jin. They take a plane to fly out to Japan, Osaka, Japan that is, all nice and fancy, and they meet the mayor, who just happens to be the biggest drug dealer in the entire fucking state of Japan. He gets him a gift, which is a statue, but inside is a bunch of crank. And everything's all fine until he sees Professor Bach is there in his presence. And this detective is really giving him a lot of shit. They get to talking and Chi-Chi's like, you know what, I don't care for that bitch ass nigga either. You can tell by looking at his face, he got some plans. He gets to the car with his gangster friend, they starts talking about that nigga Bach. They happen to look back, this nigga's pulled up behind him and shit. He's like, yeah, I don't fuck with this bitch ass either. So he comes over trying to make trouble. And he pulls him in the car, he's like, yo, fuck this, yo. As he's driving, he scrapes his body against the wall and shit. Left him laying, done deal, dead. As we see a visual of him in the house getting high or whatever, we see the aftermath. Yeah, he had cut him and his niggas up and then threw him over the ocean. He's like, yeah, we blood brothers now, nigga, blood in, blood out. You already know what it is. Yep, Lee, that's what it is. Meanwhile, Kim's still pissed off he can't do anything about Mr. Lee. But he did happen to find his calling card, you know. He ended up catching up with the dude that actually worked for Mr. Lee who pretended to work for him. He's like, man, I had to do what I had to do, you know what I'm saying? Raise my family, do all this other stuff. I need money, I'm broke. But Kim don't care about him. He's using him for small fry. He's trying to get to Mr. Lee, which barely gives him anything. And even if he does, he really can't pursue it. All right, so this is an 8-year time frame. Everything happened from 1972 on up. Now, at this point, it's 1976. He's a boss among bosses, guys on spot, in a lab of luxury. He's got a ridiculous amount of security cameras, a lab in his own house. Even when the heat chemicals rise and hits the vents, it comes out through the sprinkler system near the flowers. I gotta say, that's some smart ass shit. Got all these niggas working around the clock, importing the shipments on big ass boats with all the money. And on top of that, he does work for the community, gives to the homeless, part of the World Leaders Movement, the Athletics Commission, the women's softball team, government officials and corporate on lock. He's covered all his bases. To put in a nutshell, he basically runs Korea. Throughout all that time, Chia got himself strung out and overdosed on freaking crank. Lee paying everybody their money, you know what I'm saying, doing justice. And the cycle continues on. Meanwhile, his cousin's wilding out because his girl dumped him for this guy. But his cousin's a junkie off that crank. Lee goes to check up on him. Remember the guy that made him drink piss? Well, now he works for him. He goes in and see how terrible his cousin is. They had to tie him up because it's saving him from himself. Shadowland's like, man, you need to keep a leash on your cousin. We just finish his ass off. Lee starts talking back to him on some other shit. Shadowland's like, man, don't forget who got you where you at, dog. And here we have Mr. Lee's ex-wife, who ends up paying a visit to Chi-Chi. They end up getting to a back and forth beef. But she's like, really, I ain't got time for this shit. She comes back to the house and gets pissed off and starts tossing everything. He gets there, he's like, man, you just need to calm down. She's like, nigga, you done changed all the way to fuck up. And she basically don't want nothing to do with him no more. No matter how he looks at it, he's been burning bridges left and right. You're probably thinking to yourselves, what's she been going through with him with the last 4 years? And he gets back to the spot, have a conversation with Chi-Chi. Then we find out he's actually been doing crank for a while now. So like, man, you better straighten yourself out, man. We gotta keep you on toes. Meanwhile, Kim ends up bringing in Lee's cousin. And because Lee's been left stranded, he starts telling him everything. They call to make a setup for Lee to come looking for his cousin. But when he gets there, there's nobody there, with a bag full of drugs and needles. And the boys come to arrest him. Kim, bottom line, can ask all the questions he wants, but Lee's not answering shit. And eventually he has no choice but to let him go. And who busted him out? Chi-Chi. Then he's driving off, he's mad at Chi-Chi. He's like, my money got me out of here, not you. Then after that, kicks her out the car. This nigga really burning a lot of bridges now. Then his gangster friend calls, talking about he needs help getting out the country. He's like, man, I got my own problems, you staying here. Basically turning his back on him. I don't understand why he's turning his back on everybody right now. Then he tells his right-hand man set up some contacts so he can be safe for now. He tells him to get him in touch with the president because he's gonna need backup. So that's the reason for you burning all your bridges? Like, really? Why? So then he makes it to the electoral meeting. Kim's pissed off he can't do a damn thing about it. So Kim's pissed off he can't go after Mr. Lee, but then he gets some information, so he's like, alright, we're gonna go after his gangster friend then. So they're walking through this protest because Korea's at war for some reason, and they spot him amongst the people. But so do niggas that wanna kill him. Meanwhile, you got my nigga Shaolin in the pool sticking something in his arm. Oh, that's what else Lee told his niggas to do, to go get Shaolin. Wow. A hell of a battle, but they end up drowning his ass. Chi-Chi's packing up a bunch of money and gold when she gets a phone call. She hears about the craziness that's going on in Korea. She's like, look, we gotta get the fuck up out of here. Meanwhile, Mr. Lee's chilling on the boat with a bunch of other high executives. Next day, he hears about all the craziness going on in Korea on the news, and he finds out the president was assassinated. So the first thing he does is try to call his connects and make sure they're still there. Nobody picks up the phone except for one. They tell him, yo, just stay low. So at this point, he's basically in the house just fucking around with stuff. He gets high, starts getting paranoid, starts loading up guns, and stares at the security cameras. So now at this point, it's 1980. The garden died out, safe all open with money, the house all ran through, and he just keeps opening and closing his door back and forth. He's just taking so much drugs, his mind state is gone. He thinks he is in a complete war. Chilling in the house talking to himself with his dogs. Then he ends up calling his ex-wife and starts talking shit, who he doesn't even realize has him wiretapped with the police. There you go, Prosecutor Kim. At this point, she just didn't even give a fuck. He's just going on and on about some mayhem. So the police finally get to his spot, and they have a phone tap. You usually use that for a location, right? So you mean to tell me these motherfuckers didn't know where he stayed at for 4 years? Or is it just the fact they couldn't do shit about it? Well, anyway, he's talking to himself, flushing drugs, and apparently the police don't have no guns. Why they don't have no guns dealing with a guy like this, I don't know fucking idea. Well, this time he comes back with the troops. But these niggas still can't get past the front gate, cause Mr. Lee ain't having that shit. He thinks they're communists coming to get him and shit. So within a brief pause of the shooting, Kim sneaks by and gets face to face with Mr. Lee. He's trying to talk him down. Then Mr. Lee almost kills himself, but he rushes after him just in time. He ends up shooting himself in the shoulder. He meets up with him in the hospital. Mr. Lee straightens himself out. After they searched his house, they found his ledger books, which basically gave up his entire empire, or whatever he had left. As far as Mr. Lee goes, he ended up serving 15 years in prison. And there you have it, some drug kingpin shit. I would call it the Korean Scarface, but this came out 10 years before that shit, so there you go. The story was out before that anyway, so yeah. The Drug King on Netflix. Check it out, like, click, subscribe, do all that. You already know what time it is. Like, easy, mister. Ha 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 ha. Big, you got that slogan.